As we all live our lives, we end up bearing witness to some very interesting coincidences. For example, two different pieces of entertainment releasing at the same time. I'm sure we all remember Doom Crossing and Barbenheimer and the hilarity and memes that spawned from that. And now we have Marathon and Slay the Spire 2 releasing on the same day. But this one's interesting for different reasons. It's interesting not because it's a handshake between two different fandoms, but because it's pretty indicative of a broader shift in the whole of the gaming industry. And think about it, Marathon is the latest big project from Bungie, a developer with a very big legacy and a lot of respect attached to them, even if it kind of waned in recent years. I mean, these are the guys who gave us Halo, which is not only one of the most popular video game franchises of all time, but also a pretty large part of Western pop culture as a whole. Marathon have a lot of production value behind it and a pretty big marketing campaign, and released at a pretty reduced price compared to other AAA games on the market. Meanwhile, Slay the Spire 2 released into early access on the same day. It is only the second project that the studios worked on, not counting the board game. It is a direct sequel to the first game, which was very clearly low budget and was almost entirely self-promoted. One of these games peaked at nearly 300,000 players on its first day, to the point that Steam was actually struggling to process the payments going in, while the other had a first day peak of 80,000 players, which is nothing to scoff at, to be fair. And, of course, it's the indie project that got the higher player numbers. Yeah, it seems almost inconceivable when you actually put all the pieces together like that, but it happened. Hell, Slay the Spire 2 nearly doubled its player count on the second day. Now, there is a lot of reasons that contribute to why this turned out the way it did, but I'm not going to be talking about that. Instead, I want to use this as an example to represent a major shift in the gaming landscape and how AAA developers really need to step up their game if they want to compete. Of course, that comes with the obvious caveat, does Marathon count as a AAA game? Well, even if it doesn't, I'm sure a lot of people would associate a lot of its aspect with aspects that other AAA games share, so for the sake of argument, Marathon counts as a AAA game for this context. Now, people have been aware of the steady decline of AAA gaming for a long time. It's kind of an open secret at this point. Of course, it only really became a huge topic of discussion about 2 to 3 years ago because at that point, patience was really starting to wear thin. At that point, people were not scared to speak their mind about all the problems that the AAA gaming industry was facing. They weren't afraid to call it out on basically anything, and they weren't afraid to call for boycotts when it was very clear that the developers were working against the interests of its audience. Of course, at the same time, indie gaming was also starting to be on the rise because people were looking for alternatives. This all sort of culminated when Expedition 3 came out and everyone was swept off their feet and it absolutely destroyed the Game Awards, which, on one hand, does kind of prove how flawed the TGA nomination system really is. And on the other hand, its success alone was perhaps the biggest shame that AAA gaming could ever face. It's pretty clear what happened to them at this point. AAA gaming had effectively become Hollywood. Over-budgeted, overproduced, overstaffed, wasteful of every single possible resource it could have to make inferior products. People were quite simply sick of it. And then this game comes along, which wasn't self-published, but nevertheless was made by just a small team of developers who were just really passionate about the craft and absolutely loved gaming in general, and you can see that reflected in the work, and they managed to create an experience that is not only fantastic in its own right, but also provides the same level of production value that you thought could only come from a AAA developer. In fact, in some cases, they even do it better. And now, barely even 3 months after the award show, we get this. A big project from the same studio who brought us one of the pillars of gaming, and it's being beaten out by an indie game that went into early access and is very clearly still unfinished. Now, even though Marathon did have a massive marketing campaign, that campaign is very much where things kind of went wrong for itself. I mean, not only did they not do a good job of making this look anything unique to other shooters on the market, especially extraction shooters, but the big thing, and the one that really drove me away from ever even thinking about playing it, the art direction. And while it may sound like an oxymoron to say that a game striving for photorealistic graphics has art direction, it does, and it was the opposite of appealing. There's no nice way to say it. I think the art style for Marathon is just absolutely hideous. I think it is trying to be too many contradictory things at the same time. It's trying to be gritty and grounded, but it's also trying to be bright and colorful. It's trying to look desolate and clean at the same time. The technology is trying to look practical and impractical at the same time, and overall, it is just extremely garish and ugly. I mean, there's still some problems beyond that. Despite the legacy of the studio, favor for Bungie has been falling significantly in recent years. And on top of that, it's rebooting a game they already made, and it looks nothing like the original version. And now you have Slay the Spire 2. Slay the Spire 1 was already a loved game that built up its reputation slowly over time. It built enough of a reputation that people funded a Kickstarter for a board game adaptation, one that I took part in, actually. And even just on a surface level, the game was a very distinct upgrade from the first game. And once you actually play the game yourself, it's clear that it's not just on a visual level, it's on a mechanical level, it's on a structural level, it's on a progression level, even. I genuinely love how they updated the unlock system in this game and how they tied it into lore and how it actually kind of gives you an incentive to learn about the world's history. It's cool. It isn't just a matter of people assuming that Slay the Spire 2 would give them this superior experience to a game like Marathon. It's more so that people instinctively knew that it was going to provide a superior experience. Of course, expectations can leave you astray sometimes, I know that all too well, but that doesn't kill the enthusiasm for the game on its release. And all of this shows that the AAA gaming industry as a whole needs to learn. What do I mean by that? Well, first of all, obviously they need to start learning how to make good games, because, yeah, believe it or not, that would pull people back in. But they have so much more to learn beyond that. As great as it is if every problem had a one-step solution, unfortunately, the AAA gaming industry especially has a lot of problems that all require multi-step solutions. And if they don't learn to solve those problems soon, it's going to bite them in the ass very, very quickly. I mean, what was it I said in my last video? There is nothing special about Highguard. There is nothing unique about it, and it will not be remembered for anything when it inevitably shuts down because it hasn't been performing. Oh, and would you look at the news that broke just days after I released that video? Now, do I think Marathon will fall and fail as quickly as Highguard did? No. I actually think Marathon is going to last a lot longer than people are expecting, because even though so far its all-time player count is lower than Highguard's, Marathon is not a free-to-play game. You do have enough cost for it. That alone will keep the game supported a lot more than the shitty skins that Highguard did. I mean, hey, if I were a first-time indie developer, 80,000 players at once, I would kill for those kind of numbers. That's a lot of sales. But considering the production value of Highguard, it's probably not going to be enough. Because even though compared to Highguard they have a lot more money to keep the game supported, it's still a matter of if the game manages to break even. And that doesn't seem very likely. You know how Markiplier made Iron Lung and made much more than its budget back? Well, most of the Hollywood movies coming out nowadays struggle to break even. Yeah, that's kind of what games like E33 or Slay the Spire 2 are to the gaming industry, if you think about it. Though I will say, even though the AAA gaming industry is fucking up in a lot of regards, and I'm very glad that they are seeing the consequences for it, as weird as that sounds, I don't want it to just die out entirely. No, I'm not joking. Even though I have spent way more time on indie gaming than AAA gaming throughout my life, I don't want AAA gaming to just die out entirely. I do think it has a place in the broader industry, but not in its current state. It doesn't. Look, I just love gaming. It is a massive part of who I am, and I would not be the person I am today if not for it. Because of that, I don't want giant portions of it to just completely die. But at the same time, they do need to come to terms with what they're doing wrong. And if that means suffering the consequences of that, then so be it. Of course, indie gaming has played a much bigger part in my life as a gamer, and because of that, I am very invested in it, and I want it to succeed. Now, of course, if you know me, you would know that I have been very, very critical towards certain indie games, but that's just part of the deal. I believe that if I want indie gaming to succeed over AAA gaming, and as it stands, I do, then a part of that means that I need to be just very clear-cut and honest, which not only means praising it for what it's done right, but also to point out what it's doing wrong. Because part of wanting this side of the industry to succeed means making sure that it doesn't fall for the same trappings that AAA gaming has. Of course, it's not all sunshine and rainbows. I mean, most of the games that people immediately associate with indie gaming is just the good ones. You know, what's on the tip of the iceberg. Everything else beneath that can be a bit, ugly. The same goes for a lot of things. Not everything is good or a masterpiece, but not everything has to be. And the bottom line is that if AAA gaming wants to survive and remain successful, then it... Okay, there's a million things that it needs to do right, but a great place to start would be by actually making the good games that reach the tip of the iceberg. And, you know, maybe stop putting all your eggs into one basket and constantly expect every single game you make to be a breakout success that makes millions of dollars. You know, that might also be a good place to start. And that's about all I have to say about the game. Everything else is pretty straightforward, not much else to comment on. So if you'll excuse me, I haven't quite got addicted to Slay the Spire 2 yet, so I'm gonna go get on that.